In this exercise, we're going to discuss work axes. Inventor automatically comes with 3 axes pre-programmed into the system, the X, Y, and Z. Now, these can be useful for center lines for revolving. They can be used for orientating sketches. And they can also be used to create additional axes. If we come up here and look at the axis tool, you can see just like the work plane tool, you can do everything with the main axis command, but they give you some kind of hints and tips to create additional axes. Now, me personally, a majority of the time whenever I'm creating an axis, it's to create a more complex or difficult to create plane. So I'll create a work axis first sometimes because it's easier to create than the plane, and then I'll make a plane from that axis. So let's take a look. First one we have is on an edge or a line, and you simply select the axis command and then select the edge of a part. Doesn't really matter where we select the edge, and you see it'll create the axis. You can also create it on the outer side of a round or revolved feature. You can create an axis through the center of a hole. We can create work axes by clicking on 2 points. Much the same way we did with work planes, it doesn't matter which 2 points you pick on, Inventor will put an axis through those points. A majority of the time that I'm creating a work axis, I'm using it to create a work plane. So what I'll do is I'll create the axis, then I'll go back to the plane, and then I'll select that axis, and then I'll either select a point that it's going to go through, or I'll select something that's going to be tangent to, such as the outer of that rounded surface, maybe a point over here. Kind of see how that would create a point, and it's going to be as perpendicular to that axis that we just created. There's a lot of little uses that you can use axes for. To me, work planes are much more important, but axes can be very useful as well. So let's take a look one more here. If I turn these off, if we had a work plane, say we had a work plane here, and then if we had another work plane here, let's say, bring it out a little bit, then we could say an axis between these 2 planes. See there, put the axis there. We could do it through the center of the circle. We've already done that. Normal to a plane, throw a point. So if we had a point location in here, sometimes what I'll do is you'll have a work plane, for example, on the end here. Let's turn these work axes back on. Let me find that one that's through that center there. It is. And you may need a point where that axis and that plane intersect. See, that gives us a little work point there. Turn this one off so you can see it a little bit better. So these are literally work features. We're creating these to create something else. So there's several of them we could do. You can get creative with this. We could get creative with where we want these points to be going. Now you will notice there, if I say work axis and I click on a point, the midpoint of that line, and I click on a vertical line, so basically it says, okay, I want to axis through this point, but this is the direction I want it to be going. So like I said, play with this a little bit. We'll do a hands-on exercise, but for the most part, it's pretty intuitive. There's not a whole lot to it. So just get creative with these. Think about construction. Think about temporary construction lines and things like that. These are more for creating a plane that we're going to create a sketch on. So this is kind of a multi-step process. This isn't going to be something we're going to use to sketch off of, so to speak. It's going to be used to create the sketch that we're going to sketch off of. So get creative with this and see what you can do.